Right now, inside the Arsenal camp, there is not one storyline unfolding. There are at least 8 of them, moving at the same time, on different continents, involving different agents, different valuations, and different levels of certainty. Some of these situations are close to conclusions. Others are still just contact, still just conversation, still just interest being tested. The job today is to separate the two so that by the end of this breakdown, you know exactly what is real, what is still speculation, and what it actually means for the direction of this squad heading into the rest of the window. Because here is the thing about this specific moment in the transfer market. Arsenal are not just buying. They are also being asked to sell. And the two sides of that equation are pulling against each other. Every incoming move seems to be tied directly or indirectly to an outgoing one. A striker situation is linked to a departure. A winger pursuit depends on another winger leaving first. Nothing here is isolated. That is what makes this window worth watching closely, and that is exactly what we are going to unpack, piece by piece. Here is what is genuinely at risk in all of this. If Arsenal misjudge even one of these individual pieces, the entire structure of the squad this season could look different than expected. A winger they are trying to keep could walk. A midfielder they already paid a big fee for could be forced out the door by financial pressure from bigger clubs circling. A striker option they like could get priced out entirely, and a defensive target they need could end up going to a direct rival instead. None of this is guaranteed to happen. But every single one of these outcomes is currently on the table, based on what is confirmed right now. That is the tension running underneath this entire summer. Before we go further, if you want this kind of detailed, honest transfer breakdown, separating fact from noise, every single day this window, this is exactly the channel for that. Hit subscribe now because the next few weeks are going to move fast and you do not want to miss how any of this resolves. Now, let us go through it properly. We are starting with what has been circulating from inside sources and reporters close to the club, and then we will move into the wider picture from 2 separate detailed reports. I will read each item to you first exactly as it stands, and then I will give you my own read on what it actually means. Kenan Yildiz. The information here is that Arsenal have significantly increased their efforts to sign Kenan Yildiz over a short period of time, and they continue to push hard for his signature. On the other side, Juventus are standing completely firm. They are refusing to even open the door to a departure. Here is my read on this one. When a club is described as refusing to open the door, that is not soft resistance. That is a flat rejection of the entire conversation. Arsenal stepping up their pursuit tells you they see Yildiz as a genuine target worth pushing for, but Juventus holding that line tells you this is not close to happening. This is a classic case of interest meeting a wall. Worth watching, but do not expect movement soon. Christos Tzolis is being described as arguably the standout performer of the entire pre-season campaign so far. In just 4 matches, he has been involved in 4 goals, either scoring or assisting, and he has also won 1 penalty. The framing here is that this is about as strong a start to life at the club as a new signing could possibly have. My analysis on this is simple. 4 goal involvements in 4 matches plus a penalty won is not a small sample size to dismiss. That is genuine early production, and it explains why he is already being talked about ahead of more established wide options in the pecking order. When a new signing performs like this before the season has even started, it changes internal planning. It affects who plays, who gets squeezed, and who becomes available for sale. Keep that in mind, because it connects directly to another situation we are about to cover. Gabriel Jesus. Gabriel Jesus has reportedly given the green light to a move to Napoli. He has given the Italian club priority in negotiations, and Napoli initiated contact with him as far back as June, informing him at that point that he would be their primary target up front. Crucially, this entire deal is described as being directly linked to Romelu Lukaku's potential move to Fenerbahce. Here is what stands out to me. This is not a fresh, spontaneous development. Napoli were building toward this since June. That is 2 months of groundwork before it became public information. And the direct link to Lukaku's situation tells you this is a domino effect. Napoli likely need Lukaku to leave before they can fully commit financially or squad-wise to bringing in Jesus. So even though Jesus has apparently made his decision internally, the timeline of this deal is not fully in Arsenal's hands, or even fully in Napoli's hands. It depends on a separate transfer completing first in Turkey. Gabriel Martinelli and Galatasaray have made what is described as an exploratory approach to Arsenal regarding Gabriel Martinelli's availability. This comes specifically because there has been no breakthrough yet in their separate discussions to sign Rafael Leao. The framing is direct. This is not viewed as a sale Arsenal are expected to sanction unless they bring in a replacement first. My take here is that the word exploratory is doing a lot of work. This is not an official bid. This is a club testing the water while their primary target remains unresolved. Galatasaray are essentially keeping a second option open in case their first choice collapses. And the replacement condition attached to any Martinelli departure tells you Arsenal are not desperate to sell. They are protecting themselves from being left short in that position. Gabriel Martinelli and Romero's sporting director is reportedly in London specifically as part of an effort to complete a deal for Gabriel Martinelli. Roma have reopened talks, and there is a growing belief inside Arsenal that an agreement over his departure is not impossible. The numbers being discussed are that Arsenal could be willing to accept somewhere between 40 and 45 million euros, while the main obstacle for Roma is the player's salary, which sits around 11 million euros gross per year. This is the most tangible of the Martinelli situations in my view. A senior football executive physically travelling to London to work on a deal is a much stronger signal than an exploratory phone call. The fact that there is a growing belief inside the club that this is not impossible tells you the mood internally has shifted from resistant to open. But the salary detail is the real story here. Even if the transfer fee itself is workable, wage structure differences between the Premier League and Serie A are often what actually kill these deals in the final stages. That salary gap is the number to watch, more than the transfer fee. Pedro Neto. Arsenal have informed Pedro Neto's representatives of their interest in signing him. Chelsea are described as open to a sale, and they are asking for around £70 million. Here is my reading of this one. Informing a player's camp of interest is an early but meaningful step. It is not a bid, but it is more than passive scouting. It puts Arsenal formally on the player's radar before any formal offer is submitted. The fact that Chelsea are open to selling removes one major obstacle immediately, because plenty of transfer pursuits die simply because the selling club refuses to engage. That is not the case here. The number, £70 million, is the figure Arsenal would need to work toward if they want to turn interest into an actual deal. Ezri Konsa and Cristian Romero. Arsenal are expected to return with a new offer for Ezri Konsa. Aston Villa value him at £60 million, but with less than 2 years remaining on his contract, Arsenal are unwilling to pay that much for a 28-year-old. Separately, Arsenal have also shown interest in signing Cristian Romero from Tottenham, but any move for the Argentine defender is described as extremely unlikely, given Tottenham's reluctance to sell to their North London rivals. My analysis here has two parts. On Konsa, the resistance is about value logic, not ability. A shrinking contract length combined with an aging profile is exactly the kind of situation clubs use to negotiate fees downward, and Arsenal appear to be doing precisely that. Expect a lower opening offer than 60 million, with Villa likely holding firm initially. On Romero, the situation is almost the opposite. This is not really about valuation at all. It is about rivalry. When a source describes a move as extremely unlikely specifically because of a refusal to strengthen a direct competitor, that is a much harder barrier to break than a financial one. Money can be negotiated. Rivalry pride usually cannot. Niko Kovac on Victor Gyokeres. Borussia Dortmund manager Niko Kovac spoke after his side's Emirates Cup clash with Arsenal, and he was clearly impressed by Victor Gyokeres. He described him as strong, quick, fast, and very direct, and noted that Dortmund know him very well as a player, while stopping short of naming every individual player on the pitch. My take on this one is less about transfer business and more about a signal of standing. When an opposition manager, particularly one running a club of Dortmund's stature, singles out a forward unprompted in a post-match interview, that tells you something about current perception around that player. This is not contract talk or transfer talk. It is a reputational marker, and it is worth noting simply because it shapes how other clubs and pundits are currently viewing Arsenal's attacking options heading into the season. Martin Zubimendi. Arsenal have reportedly set a minimum asking price of £78 million for Martin Zubimendi, with interest coming from both Real Madrid and Chelsea. The Gunners signed the midfielder for around £60 million last summer, but Bruno Guimaraes' arrival has increased competition for places in that midfield. Real Madrid are monitoring the situation, while Chelsea could also enter the race, partly because of Xabi Alonso's admiration for the 27-year-old. This is one of the more layered stories in this update, and here is why. Setting a minimum asking price is a defensive move by Arsenal, not an invitation to sell. It is a number designed to discourage cheap opportunism from two of the wealthiest clubs in world football. But the deeper context is what actually matters. Bruno Guimaraes' arrival has directly changed Zubimendi's role inside that squad, and that is precisely the kind of internal shift that eventually pushes a good player toward the exit, even one signed for a significant fee just one summer ago. A £78 million valuation, up from a £60 million purchase price, tells you Arsenal are not trying to avoid a sale entirely. They are trying to make sure that if it happens on terms that protect the club financially. Bradley Barcola. Arsenal have made fresh contact with Bradley Barcola's camp as they consider a move for the Paris Saint-Germain winger. However, Liverpool remain in pole position and have already opened formal talks with Paris Saint-Germain for the 24-year-old. Paris Saint-Germain value Barcola at around €150 million, but neither Arsenal nor Liverpool are currently willing to meet that price. My reading here is fairly clear. Fresh contact is a real step, but it is happening from a position of disadvantage. Liverpool already have formal talks open, which puts them meaningfully ahead in this specific race. The valuation itself, €150 million, is the real blocker for both clubs right now, not just Arsenal. Until that number moves, or until one club decides to break from its financial position, this remains a name to watch rather than a deal to expect imminently. Now let us step back from the individual source updates and look at the two broader reports that tie a lot of these threads together. The Martinelli situation. In full, the full picture on Gabriel Martinelli is more layered than any single update suggests on its own. Roma are confirmed as the latest club showing serious interest, but they have actually spent much of the summer trying and failing to recruit a different kind of wide player entirely. They were previously interested in Tzolis before Arsenal moved first and signed him. They also attempted to sign Alejandro Garnacho from Chelsea, and they made calls about Antonio Nusa, who is instead staying at RB Leipzig following a separate departure from that club to Real Madrid. Only after all of those routes closed did Martinelli become a serious target for Roma. Turkish giants Galatasaray remain a separate, secondary possibility. What is completely clear at this stage is that Arsenal will only consider selling Martinelli if they can bring in what they view as an upgrade first. Right now, Martinelli looks set to begin the season as the club's second-choice left winger behind the informed Tzolis, while he continues rebuilding his fitness following his involvement with Brazil at the World Cup. Roma are considered unlikely to have the financial strength to match, let alone improve on, his current Arsenal salary. On top of that, Arsenal hold the option to extend his contract by an additional year, with his current deal set to run until 2027. The Galatasaray side of the story connects to their pursuit of Rafael Leao from AC Milan, a deal that has not progressed. Their most recent bid for Leao is believed to be worth around £30 million, well below what Milan actually want, which is reported to be closer to £43 million, or around €50 million. Only if that pursuit collapses entirely would Galatasaray likely turn their full attention to Martinelli. Here is the layer that makes this genuinely complicated. Arsenal have not yet warmed to any of the realistic alternatives being floated to replace a departing forward like Vinicius Jr. type profile. Barcola is seen internally as overpriced given Paris Saint-Germain's valuation, and he is believed to personally favour a move to Liverpool over any other option. Kenan Yildiz, as we already covered, signed a new long-term contract with Juventus back in February, making a move highly unlikely barring something dramatic. Other names being floated include Everton's Iliman Ndiaye, though he would compete for a number 10 role already occupied by captain Martin Odegaard, along with Eberechi Eze and Ethan Nwaneri, the latter of whom could himself depart. My overall analysis of this entire situation is this. Martinelli's future is not really about Martinelli at all right now. It is about a chain reaction. Arsenal need a replacement forward before they sell. Every realistic replacement option currently has a complication attached to it, whether that is price, contract status, or personal preference. Until one of those replacement pieces actually falls into place, Martinelli almost certainly stays exactly where he is, regardless of how much interest Roma or Galatasaray continue to show. This is a domino chain, and right now, the first domino has not fallen. The defensive search, Joaquin Seys. The second wider report centres on Arsenal scouting club Brugge defender Joaquin Seys, valued at around £30 million, just weeks after already signing winger Tzolis from the same Belgian club. Arsenal are said to be looking for a different option at full-back, and they have carried out extensive scouting work, with a formal dossier reportedly landing on the head coach's desk. However, this is not a straightforward pursuit. Manchester United are also strongly interested, having initially attempted a move for Newcastle's Lewis Hall, an approach that Newcastle firmly rejected, making it clear Hall is not for sale. That rejection is what pushed United towards Seys as their alternative target. Beyond United, Aston Villa, along with Portuguese heavyweights Benfica and Porto, are all also credited with interest in the same player. The head coach addressed the broader transfer approach directly, stating that the club is trying to identify the right player in the market who can make the squad much better, and confirming that this remains something they are actively looking forward to resolving. Seys himself has 3 years remaining on his current contract, and Brugge are under no financial pressure to sell him quickly, having just profited from the Tzolis transfer. Manchester United's motivation is tied to needing a long-term replacement for Luke Shaw, while also balancing other squad priorities ahead of their return to the Champions League. Aston Villa's interest connects to their own vacancy at left-back following Lucas Digne's departure back to Paris Saint-Germain, leaving manager Unai Emery with a gap of his own to fill. My read on this situation is that Seys represents a genuinely contested target, not a one-club pursuit. 4 separate clubs circling the same player, combined with his club having no urgency to sell, usually means one of 2 outcomes. Either the price gets driven upward through genuine competition, or the player himself ends up making the decision based on project and playing time rather than reputation alone. For Arsenal, the fact that they have already built trust and a relationship with Brugge through the Tzolis deal could be a quiet advantage in these negotiations, even if it is not something being said publicly. So here is where all of this actually leaves things. Nothing covered today is confirmed as completed. Every single situation, from Zubimendi's valuation to Martinelli's future, to the Seys chase, to the Barcola and Konsa stories, remains open, active, and connected to at least one other moving part elsewhere in the squad. That interconnected nature is exactly why this window deserves close attention rather than reaction to any single headline in isolation. If this kind of detailed, connected breakdown is what you want from your football content, make sure you are subscribed, because there is a lot more still to unpack before this window closes.